It's hard to think of another car that's been as consistently brilliant as the BMW 5 Series. Over 50 years and 7 generations, it's won an army of fans, and more often than not, it's delivered a very well built and practical interior, an extremely comfortable ride, and genuinely engaging driving dynamics. This is the new 8th generation 5 Series, and a lot is new, but does it still live up to the name? So, the new 5 Series, codenamed G60. This is still a rival to cars like the Audi A6 and the Mercedes E-Class, but it is the biggest 5 Series ever. In fact, this takes up a similar amount of room on the road as the old 7 Series, and it has had a styling update as well. Now, it's not quite as divisive as some other BMW designs, if you think of the iX and the 4 Series, but this still has divided some BMW fans. So, tell us in the comments below what you think of the looks of this new 5 Series. Design features to point out include this grille at the front, and actually the fact that it's quite traditional rather than going down the 4 Series route. You can also get this LED light strip around the outside to illuminate it at night. You get adaptive LED headlights as standard. There are flush door handles, and the alloys range from 19 inches up to 21 inches. Now, inside, you get a very comfortable driving position in every 5 Series. You get electric adjustment for the seat as standard, which also includes electrical lumbar adjustment, and you have very good forward visibility out the front. It's not quite so impressive out the back, but you still get a reversing camera and all-round parking sensors as standard. Plus, on the options list, you can also add a 360-degree bird's eye view camera setup, which is very fancy indeed, and means parking this pretty big car is actually fairly simple to do. We also mentioned earlier you get adaptive LED headlights as standard, and what's great about that is it means at night you can leave your full beams on and the car will automatically adapt the output of the light to mean that it doesn't dazzle oncoming road users, which is very useful to have. On the options list, you'll also find a head-up display, but as standard you get this fully digital driver display that you can see here. And it's very good because the graphics are nice, the information is very clear, but the problem that I have is that for my driving position, the top of the steering wheel cuts off a pretty significant chunk of the top of the screen there, which is really frustrating. And unfortunately, this is very common in new cars with this fully digital driver display. Anyway, you can see that it's attached to this touchscreen infotainment system up here to give this widescreen techie layout to things. Now, we have for many years been praising BMW for its fantastic infotainment system, and it's always been better than the other infotainment systems out there. That is, broadly speaking, the same for this new model, but it's not without its flaws. So one of the reasons that iDrive has always been fantastic is the fact that you get a rotary dial down here on the center console. So you can scroll and select and change menus far more simply than you can if it was touchscreen only. Because if you're poking and prodding at the screen while you're driving, it's far more distracting to do than if you're just using this physical control down here. But this rotary dial is actually a bit thin, so it can be kind of difficult to grip, and also if you want to go back or forwards to some different menus or pushing it up and down, it actually doesn't feel particularly satisfying or easy to do that. It's almost like you've got to break the rotary dial to do it, which you aren't, but it gives the impression that you kind of are. So that doesn't feel particularly intuitive, and it is a shame that, yes, you've got shortcut buttons on the center console, which is great, but they're on this wobbly plastic touch sensitive setup thing down here, and it just means it's a bit more difficult to hit these buttons than if they were just simple, chunky, physical separate buttons down here. That would be better. But ultimately, this is still easier to use than the system that you get in an A6 or in an E-Class, which are touchscreen only, and there is also a voice control function that you can use in this as well. Now, the infotainment system itself has nice graphics, it looks very modern and crisp, but it is still the case with this modern BMW setup that there are a lot of menus and a lot of sub-menus. And just look at this screen here. There are so many different icons to scroll through. And the reality is, you need hardly any of them, really. So it would perhaps benefit from being simplified to a certain extent. But still, as we say, compared to modern rivals, this is still a very good infotainment system setup, even if it's not perfect. Now, as for quality in here, well, things look pretty snazzy and pretty much everything feels good as well. So you've got nice soft touch materials on the dashboard, you've got this interesting finish on the dash as well. And a great thing is that you can, as a no-cost option, choose some different finishes here. And similarly, you can choose from some brighter colours for the upholstery as well. And it's great that you can do that as a no-cost option. Again, compared to an A6, compared to an E-Class, this is really pretty nice up front. Is it better than the previous 5 Series? Not quite so sure, but the fact is, compared to its modern rivals, this is still very good. Now, for practicality, you have plenty of room up front. This is a big car after all. And on this padded central armrest here, you've got this cubby, which isn't quite as deep as you might expect. You've also got 2 cup holders up here and a spot for your wireless phone charging at the top. And the door bins are a decent size up front as well. Now, we mentioned earlier that this is the biggest 5 Series ever. So are these rear seats the best ever as well? You can see that in terms of headroom, it's pretty good back here. You can get a 6-footer in here, no problem at all. Legroom is also good, but it's not particularly exceptional. It doesn't feel like a limo in these rear seats. And if the driver's seat is as low as it will go, then you can see there's not really much room to squeeze your feet in underneath either. If you're sat in the middle here, then you are higher than you are in the outer 2 rear seats. The seat base is firmer, so is the backrest, so it's not particularly comfortable. And you've got a big transmission tunnel down here that you've got to put your feet either side of as well. But still, ultimately, you can fit adults in the back here without too much fuss. The final thing to mention though is the fact that the actual sitting position is a bit strange because this bench feels quite low to the floor. And the result is that your knees are quite high up. And it just means that there isn't much under thigh support. So there is room back here for adults, but it's not perfect. The 5 Series gets a 520 litre boot, no matter which fuel-powered version you go for. In the Mercedes E-Class, that does get a 540 litre boot, which is bigger, but if you go for a plug-in hybrid version of the Mercedes, then overall boot capacity drops massively down to 370 litres, which is quite a big compromise to make. And that's one that you don't have to make if you go for a plug-in hybrid 5 Series, because the boot capacity is the same as the entry-level 520i. Now, you can see the boot space that you have here is massive and should prove to be very practical no matter how you want to use your 5 Series. The space goes back very, very far. You've got quite a big opening here, but what you see is what you get. There's no height adjustable boot floor or anything fancy really to point out. Plus, it's not a perfect space because obviously you've got quite a lot of these bulges on either side which eat into the overall capacity. But the bottom line is, this is still a big and practical space. Like the E-Class, the rear seats split fold 40-20-40, and if you want to put them down, then you've got these releases here, but you can see they don't fold down themselves. You've either got to dive in through the boot or come to the rear seats to pull them down yourself. Now, they don't lie flat to the boot floor, but obviously it is still useful being able to put them down because it increases the overall capacity available there. Now, if you love the 5 Series, but it's not quite practical enough for you, then there is an estate version called the 5 Series Touring, and that offers 570 litres of overall storage below the parcel shelf here. And by the way, the fully electric version of the 5 Series does have a smaller boot than the regular car, but only drops down to 490 litres. Yes, there is a fully electric 5 Series, and that is big news for the car. So let's look at the lineup as a whole and see what's on offer. But we'll start with what you can't get, and that is a diesel. There is no diesel option whatsoever in the new 5 Series lineup, which would have been completely unthinkable just a few generations ago. But now the 5 Series starts with a 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine in the 520i, and then above that you've got 2 plug-in hybrids. There's the 530 and the more powerful 550e. Then above them is where you have the fully electric versions called the i5, and it starts with the eDrive 40, and the range-topping version is the M60. But we're focusing on the other fuel-powered versions of the 5 Series, and really the 520i, it's the entry-level choice, but it's a good engine. It'll do 0 to 62 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds. You do need to rev it pretty hard to get up to speed quickly, but for the most part, it's a decent fit for the car and a pretty smooth engine. The plug-in hybrids are noticeably quicker, so the 530e can cover 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.3 seconds, and the more powerful 550e takes another 2 seconds off that. And don't forget, of course, because they've got batteries and electric motors, they can both travel on pure electric power alone. Now, when it comes to official ranges, the 530e can travel up to 63 miles, whereas the 550e can travel up to 55 miles. But do bear in mind that those official ranges are very, very difficult to achieve in real-world driving conditions. And actually, compared to a plug-in hybrid E-Class, that offers a significantly better range. And that also means that this plug-in hybrid 5 Series sits in a higher benefit in kind tax bracket than you might imagine, which is significant if you're a company car buyer in the UK. But if you are, then just bear in mind as well that the much more expensive fully electric i5 actually costs less to run, significantly so, as a company car. All of which means that for most people, if you're looking for a fuel-powered 5 Series, you're probably best off sticking with a 520i. And by the way, there will be a performance-focused M5 on the way pretty soon, and it will have more than 700 brake horsepower, a V8 engine, and for the first time, a plug-in hybrid setup. Anyway, what's this new 5 Series like on the road? Well, it's based on updated architecture from the previous cars, so it's not exactly the same, but neither is it wildly different, and it is bigger, as we mentioned before. So the ride on the regular suspension setup, it does feel a bit firm at low speeds, and it does tend to fidget around as well. However, if you pass over a speed bump or a pothole, then it actually absorbs those impacts really impressively. There's no harsh rebound, there's no really loud thwack thundering through the interior like you get on an E-Class. So it's certainly better than that car in that respect. And then once you're up at motorway speeds, that is really the 5 Series at its best. It's quiet, it's calm, it's nicely settled as well. If you want the best riding 5 Series though, then you will need Adaptive Suspension Professional. And unfortunately, that is only available with the more expensive versions of this car. So you can't, for example, add it to a 520i, which is a real shame. In terms of handling, this does feel like a big car, but you've got precise, well-weighted steering, and really what's very impressive about the 5 Series is the body control. Everything feels calm, settled, tight, and when you're going around a corner, there's really hardly any body lean at all. So on a twisty road, this is definitely more inspiring to drive than an A6 or an E-Class. Now, how competitive is the 5 Series when it comes to costs? Well, compared to an A6, this does look rather pricey. On the other hand, an E-Class is significantly more money. So this sits in the middle between those two alternatives. It is a shame though that you don't get more kit as standard. The lineup starts with M Sport, which gets things like climate control, 19-inch alloys, adaptive LED headlights, and heated front seats. Then above that, you have M Sport Pro, which basically just adds some exterior styling and not much else. So, unless you're desperate for those styling features, we would stick with the entry-level trim and instead spend some of your money on an optional extra or two. The main option that stands out is the Comfort Plus pack, which brings luxuries like keyless entry, an electric boot lid, 4-zone climate control, heated and ventilated front seats, a heated steering wheel and heated rear seats. But it is still a shame that you don't get a few more luxuries as standard, because this is a very expensive car, even at its entry level. So whichever version of the 5 Series you go for, it's pretty inevitable that you will want to dive into the options list. This car, for example, has £10,000 worth of extras. So remember, in this review, we're not talking about the fully electric i5. We're focusing on the fuel-powered versions of the new 5 Series. And those cars are really good. They're comfortable, they're great to drive, they're nice inside, but for the plug-in hybrids, they're really on the pricey side. And the official ranges that they offer aren't that impressive compared to other rivals. And then that only leaves you with the 520i, which is very good, but it's a shame there isn't a more diverse engine lineup to choose from. And even with the fuel-powered versions that are available, they don't quite perhaps reach the heights that you might imagine from a car with the 5 Series badge. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And if you want to save thousands of pounds off a new 5 Series, then click on that link to go to whatcar.com, where you can also read our written review of this car and everything else.